In today's video, I will be showing you how to replace the glass on an iPhone X. You will also need a new bezel. As we remove the glass, we will be ruining the bezel, so we'll need one of those. There it is, cracked in the corner. I'll show you how we do this. Let's get started. The first thing that I'm going to do is use some alcohol and a little plastic pry tool to start cutting in between the bezel and the display and loosening the adhesive that sits on the back side of the display attached to the metal frame. Next, I'll use this heat plate. It's severely hot. Here you can see some alcohol that I've dripped on the heat plate. Next, I'll take a pry tool and I will separate the bezel from the glass up top, and then with some wire cutters I'm going to snip and break that apart. And using that as a center point, we'll go from either side. Let's go ahead and test the display. I forgot to do that at the beginning. I'll show you that it's currently working. Now that we know that we haven't damaged it yet, let's continue on. I'll continue to use alcohol and the little plastic tools to help cut the adhesive. I don't want there to be any extra pressure as I remove the bezel pulling at the display, because these displays are super fragile and the one wrong move can basically end its life for good. So it's something to, this is I would say the most tricky part of the entire repair, is simply getting the bezel off without damaging the display. So I take my time here, adding as much alcohol as I need. And using the heat to do that. And we'll move down the side, and then once we've gotten all the way down the side, we'll move over to the other side and do the same thing over there. And once I've done that on both sides, I should be able to lift up the bottom gently. Let's go ahead and test it again, just to make sure we're not wasting our time. There's the Apple symbol, looks good. We'll test the touch functionality, see that it's all still working as well. Now we'll take a razor blade and we're going to go around the edge, and we're going to remove some of the leftover adhesive that was holding the bezel on, especially up at the top where we're going to start cutting with the wire. Using the heat plate, I'm going to help loosen up that adhesive and pull it off, and with the razor blade get the more stubborn pieces off gently without cutting into the display or the digitizer. Then we'll use some tape to make sure that the glass stays in one piece. Next, we'll get out my heat plate. This is the same heat plate, the exact same heat plate that Zach used from Jerry Rig Everything in the video he did. He was doing the Apple Watch Series 4 with me. I'll carefully start cutting with the wire. We'll go under the edge on both corners and meet up in the middle, and then moving back and forth from side to side, we'll make our way all the way down to the bottom and separate the glass from the rest of the display. making sure we get in between the glass and the digitizer and not in between the digitizer and the display. Although if you do get in between the digitizer and the display, that's not a big deal. There is still a solution, which you will see later on in this video, so stick through to the end. The next thing I'm going to do is carefully pick at the adhesive. There are multiple ways to get this adhesive off. I'm going to show you I'd say the more tedious way, just because some of you may not have the tools that, or I guess the chemicals that will help loosen up the adhesive. So this is a way to do it by gently rubbing at it and finding a point to grab onto. Sometimes you can get lucky and pull up the majority of the adhesive at once, but a lot of the time it breaks, and so it's just going to come off in little pieces here and there. Another way that you can do it, if you have the tool, is using the same heat plate. I have a mat that's shaped to fit the back of the screen there, and that warms up the adhesive, allowing it to roll off much easier. Now this is really hot. This can cause blisters because of the amount of rolling that you have to do to get it off. Now that it's off, let's go ahead and clean it up and then test it again just to make sure everything's working just fine. We'll go and connect it to the phone and turn it on. Looks like we haven't damaged the display yet. It's good. But here I noticed something. The 1, 2, the 3, and anything above that isn't working right now. And I examined it really closely, and you can see right there a teeny little nick. Somehow, I don't know when, I damaged the digitizer. What to do? Well, let's go ahead and just replace the digitizer and the glass all at once. We'll get the heat plate back out again. We'll put it back on there. And this time, we will use the wire and cut in between the digitizer and the display. Now this is tricky. You have to be precise with the wire. Make sure it gets in there perfectly. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do one corner, and then we'll switch over to the other corner, making sure that we meet up in one place. Another thing we're going to need to do is carefully remove the flex cable for the digitizer that's adhered down to the display, and also desolder this joint here for the touch. I'm going to take my tweezers here, and I'm going to pry as I heat up the flex cable. I'll pry those two flex cables apart, and I'll add some flux and some solder to help this process go smoother. And if the soldering iron isn't cutting it, we'll just go ahead and use some heat, some hot air. Just don't burn yourself. We'll continue cutting the digitizer after separating the rest of the flex cable from the display, using the same method with our plastic little pry tools and alcohol to loosen the adhesive that's holding the flex cable down to the display. The alcohol has no effect on the display, so it's okay to use, more than you think you need. Sorry for my arm getting in the way there. start on the other side, the other corner. We'll start cutting down that way. Make sure we're not getting under the polarizer or anything. Make sure we're in the right layers. It's tricky to make sure you do this correctly. If you cut into the polarizer, it can be replaced, but that's a whole nother process in and of itself on this type of display. Looks like we're getting all the way through. Now we'll probably have to run the wire a couple times under the display because it tends to stick again. And again, I apologize for the arm in the way. And here you'll be able to get a look at what the touchscreen or digitizer looks like on an iPhone X. This would be the same as the XS or the XS Max. They're flexible, kind of fun. Now we'll go ahead and clean up the display, removing the adhesive. And then of course, we'll test it again just to make sure we're still not wasting our time. How's them apples? Now of course we don't have touch functionality at this point, so we won't be able to do anything like turn it off. So we'll just unplug the battery instead. Now we'll get out another machine here. This machine will help us install a sheet of OCA, that's optical clear adhesive, on the new digitizer. And there it is. We'll line it up on the new digitizer, and using suction, we will lift it. This allows me to align it perfectly as I set it back down. I'll pull off the protector there after cleaning the digitizer and roll it out. And if there's any bubbles left under the OCA, it's not a big deal. I'll just put it in my autoclave. Now we'll need to get a mold that will align the display with the new glass and digitizer. Then we'll clean up any fingerprints or dust or anything that's going to get wedged in between potentially wedged in between the glass and the display. And there's some of the blisters that I acquired from removing the adhesive. The things you do for a video, right? Once we've cleaned up the display and it's free of any dust specks or fingerprints, we'll go ahead and peel off the protector that's protecting the underside of the OCA and lay the glass out and line it up with the display and make sure it gets down there and centered in perfectly. Once we are confident that it's centered perfectly, we'll go ahead and push in the middle and get it starting to adhere to the glass. Then we'll place that here on our rubber mold that's designed also to fit the iPhone X, and we'll stick it in our laminator. I have this set at 55 degrees Celsius or so. It's at 35 seconds. And once that is done, we'll most likely have bubbles. So we'll want to stick it in our autoclave here to remove those bubbles. And then once that cycle is complete, we'll verify again that there are no more bubbles working on soldering the flex cable back together and finishing up this repair. Look at them, beautiful. Peel off the protector for the adhesive that'll hold the flex cables to the display and line it up again. There, I've soldered it all together. This video is already running long enough, I didn't feel like showing that portion. We'll go ahead and connect it and test it again. And again, it's coming on, which means it didn't break in that process, which is good. We got touchback, looks good. I hold it to the side because I don't want any of the customer's information to be visible, so if you're wondering why I've done that every time, that's why. We'll clean up the adhesive on the back side of the display so that the new adhesive has a nice clean surface to stick to. Gently pull off the protector here that's covering up the rest of the ribbon cable. Now this was the smallest nozzle that it came with. I wish it was smaller. Because the bead that comes out is still too thick, making it so that I have to do more cleanup than I'd like. But, you know, it's as long as it comes out good and works, then it doesn't really matter at this point. A little too much adhesive isn't always a bad thing. We'll go ahead and push it down all around, make sure that it gets a good seal on the glass, and work it around any flex cables that we have to. And then we'll clean up the excess adhesive that gets squeezed out of the bezel. And to be safe, let's go ahead and use some clamps on all the corners and sides to make sure that this can set up properly. We'll leave this for a few minutes until it's cured before giving it a final cleaning and a test. Enough clamps, you think? I'd say so. Let's go ahead and clean it up and then test it out. We should be done. We can go ahead and put it back on the customer's phone. They'll be happy to have a new glass on their phone and not have that crack to look at or cut themselves on anymore. And there it is. Beautiful. Like it should be. If you like the video, feel free to like it. Subscribe if you haven't. Thanks for watching.